Good evening and welcome to Mechanics of the Fourth Wall with myself, Nathan Oakley, and Antonio Subrats. How are you doing, Antonio?
I'm doing smashing. How are you, Nathan?
Absolutely wonderful as ever. This show is a bit of a throwback to the first ever Mechanics of the Fourth Wall. And the reason is because we've done a few religious episodes and Antonio has been pinned against the wall for something he said recently about shall I paraphrase it or should I just say exactly what you said, Antonio?
Oh, up to you. Up to you.
Something along the lines of, if you think the Bible was written by God, then F you, were something along the lines of what Antonio said. And at the time, I kind of passed it off. So I avoided or dodged the flack that Antonio received for saying this. But in many ways, I kind of agree. And this is coming from a self-confessed Christian point of view. And one of the things that Antonio said was that I do believe in God. And I think, would you agree? You do believe in God, do you not, Antonio?
I think it's impossible to understand that you live on a flat earth and not also understand that you're living on something that has the fingerprints of the creator or creators all over the place. It doesn't compute. There has to be a creator or creators. I don't like to say the word God because I think that that's very limited, and that always leans towards patriarchy, male. You say, whoa, where's the female? And then that brings duality, which is also a human trait. We find duality, that maybe there doesn't need to be a female, and all of these circuitous thoughts that you can't find the answer to, not from here anyway. So I'd rather refer to it as the great mystery.
But there's also another reason why you say the word gods, plural, and that's from the Hebrew translations from the Bible, is it not also?
Yes, the original word Elohim is plural. This is the thing. And even though people know this, even when people know this, they still use the word God. Even, I'll say it as an exclamation, which is not a sin, by the way, because the commandment is not to say the name of the Lord your God in vain, not the class of being that it is. So it doesn't say don't say God, it says don't say God's name, Yahweh. But that's in that world. So this idea of this patriarchal singular God is just something we've inherited, and it's a mistake. That's it, basically.
I mean, the first subject we were going to go on to, I'll spin out into what I was going to use as the last subject, because just before the show we sort of diced up what we were going to talk about, and one of the things was specific to 3 individual YouTubers who I'll name. So we've got Russian Vids, Nathan Bell, and RSE, or R$E, but it's definitely RSE. And all 3 of these channels will expose subliminal messages. Now, for the sake of ease, we'll stick to Russian Vids, because occasionally I do give him a bit of flack, when in fact he's one of my favourite YouTubers. Nathan Bell no longer produces material on subliminal messages, whereas Russian Vids is continually exposing the hidden meanings, the occult symbolism that's placed in, hidden in plain sight. And 70% of the time, I think he's actually bang on. He's absolutely correct. And he's also correct in his way of describing where this information is designed to lead you, which is to point you in the direction of the occult. And once you scratch that surface, you'll find that a lot of the literal powers that be are actually worshipping Satan. Now, there's been a few occasions where Antonio and I've had this pointed out to us, and we've kind of gone, yeah, we know. And then I won't name and shame anybody in particular, but they'll tell us that, well, no, but they genuinely believe it. They genuinely believe that there is a power, in quotes, power, the devil, that these people worship. And we again nod along and go, yes, we know these people do actually believe that they are worshipping this power that is the antithesis the correct word, Antonio? The antithesis of God. So you've got people who believe in, because of the Bible primarily, this opposite of their walking flesh and blood Saviour, Jesus Christ, the devil, this man on the plane, the man on earth, who is worshipped by the very people who literally control a lot of our commodities, a lot of our land, a lot of our travel, the infrastructure that we depend on, or we think we depend on. Mm-hmm. My point is that with Russian vids, where I give him grief, is that he falls short of the next step, which is to say that that's not necessarily true.
The reason for the hiding of things in plain sight where people can find them is not so that people will somehow discover that the elites worship the devil and you know, because the devil worshippers like to mock us. The reason that the things are hidden in plain sight is that the Vatican wants people to think about the devil because it leads people to think about God and the Vatican, the Pope, basically, which is the highest order of all the Christian faiths, the highest representative of the entity we call Jesus or God. This is why these things are hidden in plain sight. Things that are not there to be found or spotted, you don't find and spot. And the idea that they do it to mock us, okay, that's a little bit facile. So when you think about it, why do they put things where we can find them, as Russian vids finds? They put them there, like Nathan has said, to give the illusion that these guys worship a mocking God who says to them, you can mock the people who don't believe like you do. They don't worship me. And this is Lucifer. They don't worship Lucifer or Satan. So you can mock them. They're there to be used and abused, and you can mock them. It's a tribute to me for you to mock them. Okay? That's not what's happening. The whole point of the hidden in plain sight regarding the satanic, you know, Jabulon and the Baphomet and these characters, the whole reason they're there is to give this illusion of power, which is what Nathan has said so many times. These guys want to give the illusion that they have power, otherworldly power, supernatural power, power that comes by virtue of being bestowed upon them by the creature they worship. Now imagine for a second that there is no such creature. Now this does not mean, therefore, there is no creator to the flat earth. No. The creatures we're talking about, Satan and the singular God, are inventions by man. The thing that made everything can't be properly understood. How can we understand it? We're trapped in these bodies, and the processor that we have is our brain. How are we going to try to understand something that is so much more highly advanced? We don't have a prayer. It's like expecting an ant to understand what we're doing when we're writing a complex equation. There's no chance the ant is going to understand that.
The trouble is, we require explanations. We need explanations, and we pull explanations out our ass on a daily basis. But in reality, they're not pulled out of our ass. They're pulled out of our memory banks. So in the case of the good versus evil, I love Star Wars as the best example of this. We are given ideas, suggestions of this power battle with literal men with lightning coming from their fingers that can control the dark forces that are in our world. All of these ideas leave you with the impression, once you've scratched the surface, to find the Satanists that are, well, we've gone one step further, actually. It would be the Freemasons, the step before that, would it not?
Yeah.
But, you know, that would lead you ultimately to the step we've taken it to, which is devil worship. And what you're going to pull out of your memory banks is all of those subliminal images. The same applies to things that we've discussed on some of the health shows we did in about 10 days ago, a whole series of them. But some of those properties that are potentially maybe described as mocking us. So superhero movies show us abilities And the most mild version of this was a movie called Unbreakable, which some people may or may not remember, an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And in Unbreakable, it just has a series of superheroes and supervillains, but they're regular folk to the most part. So the guy, the main character that Bruce Willis plays, doesn't get sick. You know, he's incredibly strong. He doesn't seem to break, hence the title Unbreakable. And his adversary, Samuel L. Jackson's character, is very, very fragile, but goes to great extents to find this unbreakable character by causing carnage and plane crashes and train crashes and so on and so forth. Again, this could be considered a sort of a mocking of people's inner abilities that we have anyway, that are within all of us. But when you have this paradigm given to you that the people who are in power have literal power, it makes, or it belittles the average Joe, you and me, into thinking that we are powerless, or that we have less power than the elites or the people that give us all of this nonsense. So things like superhero movies, possibly not tied in with the devil worship aspect also, although some might argue that as being the case, but certainly with the good versus evil, the story that's the age-old story of Hollywood, you're always left with this mystical power, this force, this dark energy that is controllable. And in my humble opinion, we are all equal. We all have a massive amount of power. I have no more than any other man. I am not more powerful for being a flat earther, but there is a potential when you start to question and investigate of your own accord that you will discover your own inner abilities, which have potentially been locked away, not by our will, but by the propagandized information we are given about what we are in a very literal way, and what the people who control us are. And that is powerful, the lightning out of the fingers, which is, of course, complete and utter nonsense.
I couldn't have put it better myself. You know, this is how I see it. We have something going on here, which is an experience of life that we experience subjectively, and we don't really know what we are. Apart from human beings, the consciousness that we are, what we're part of, we don't fully understand it. Some people think that this is God trying to understand himself or herself or itself. These are all terms that people put because they're trying to give qualities to a thing whose qualities we can't describe. We're so arrogant that we think we have discovered all of the forces, all of the energies that are there to be discovered. We think this, and we think that we can ascribe qualities to the great mystery which we find pleasing. So qualities that are human-like, and that are human-like like us. So hence, you know, Christian world predominantly white. So God is white, you know, Sistine Chapel. And it's like, okay, let's step back a minute and look at what's going on. We have an extraordinary experience, okay? Or maybe an ordinary experience, don't know. But we're here. We're here for a reason. We don't come with a preset program telling us what the reason is, and then we just go through and do that, you know, like a video game. You know, you have to hit that mark and then that one, and you go to the next level. We don't know this. We don't know what the markers are. You know, it's not a game. It's more like a dream. But in this field that we find ourselves, in this, how did Tesla put it? Realm. In this realm, there are qualities that are absolutely stunningly interesting. Like, just, what is this? A flower blossoming, bees flying, all kinds of stuff. Just absolutely stunning, amazing, well calibrated, perfectly tuned qualities. And we think the thing or things that orchestrated all of this is one entity, and that entity made another entity to be like his jousting opponent, or, you know, his fencing opponent. He was kind of bored and made an almost as powerful as him opponent to trick people and and do things. It's like, this idea is absurd. And it will come to a point where, for instance, way back when, boroughs were run by chiefs, okay? You had the chief. This became the lord of the manor, okay? In feudal days, moving forward, okay? We have things that we no longer have, okay? There will come a time where we no longer have kings and queens. And then people will think and study about kings and queens and think, well, that was weird. People thought these people had power. And this is what we're talking about. Power. People thinking that other people have power, okay? And people will think, well, wasn't that ludicrous? Living in a palace with an army guarding them from what? Didn't the people love them? And all kinds of stuff. And there will come a time when people will think, they believed in what? In a guy who was killed and came back to life and had all kinds of abilities that are powers. They believed in that. And before that, they believed in what? Thor and Zeus and Odin and those guys. And before that, and we will be seen as a species, as a stage of the human species that was trying to figure out what was going on, not finding a way of figuring it out, partly because our thinking had been limited by people who benefit from people thinking there's a God and there's a devil. Those people are the ones that hide things in plain sight, and they hide them so that we think they have power. And the truth is, there is power. Like Nathan said, you have the power to create life. You have power to burn, to destroy, to sow and reap, to dream. You have abilities that are just...
Well, what nice segue, because what you've just described is beautiful. What you've described is good and evil. Now, good and evil are within all of us. We all have the potential to be good, and we all have the potential to commit horrific crimes and be evil. Now, by attributing the power to an entity, the devil, and the people who worship the devil will justify their actions using that same entity, it passes off responsibility to something that is beyond the individual, when in reality, this is where superheroes do tie in, it is just the same in terms of what people can and can't do. It is within ourselves. But equally, you know, we are all human beings and we all have the same potential. You know, it's just about the doing, you know, and Flat Earth is a nice example of a revelation making many, not all, actually do, look, find, smell, sniff, taste, all of these things that we can experience firsthand rather than on the TV, on the newspapers, all of these things which have been hijacked by pretty much one guy, which is Bernays, was it nephew of Sigmund Freud?
Yes.
So he has propagandized all of our media, and the tricks that Russian Vids points out, he's right. You know, these things are put there very deliberately. When Russian Vids says things like, none of these things are by accident, they're very carefully orchestrated, he's right, he's correct. They have been very carefully placed in. In the case of, I only saw this once, but a Katy Perry behind the scenes when she's filming a music video, and she says, oh, we'll get to the scene where we do the subliminals. Now, this is on a mainstream behind the scenes. They want you to go, what subliminals? What does that mean? And look into it and find it and go along that rabbit, down that rabbit hole to eventually find, you know, Freemasonry and to eventually be led on to devil worship. And it gets worse because there's a lot of people out there who, as we say, do genuinely believe this and do horrific things. And these things will make it into the mainstream media, you know, with all the subliminals and all the spin and all the propaganda alongside it. But these, on many occasions, will be real events, things that have happened, horrific things that are done in the name of the devil. You know, and you can investigate them and find that they are literally done in the name of the devil. And that's terrifying to your average Joe till you go one step further to realize that that's just one, normally, not always, but just one guy. One guy has done something horrific. I think on that show that we got, or you got grief for, Antonio, we talked about witches and saying back in the day when people believed that witches had power, maybe there's more truth to that than we realize, they would be tied to stakes and burned. Well, the devil wasn't standing in the corner. Men, frog marched women to their death, and men took torches and burnt them. Well, those are evil men, but that's where it ends.
That's where it gets confusing for people, because this is a rabbit hole. You know, we've moved, instead of coming to our senses and thinking, okay, let's live happily. Let's see how we can figure out how to live happily and engage with the world in a non-offensive way. Instead of doing that, we've succumbed to these ideas of good and evil and representatives to them. Now, this is a very primitive idea. You have representatives of tribes. You know, my tribe's representative is that guy. Your tribe's representative is that guy. My guy is good. Your guy is bad. Done. There you go. God, Lucifer, or Satan. And we're still pushing that, but with different names. Okay, the truth is, a really evil person does something really evil in the name of Satan. Okay. What about the really evil deed, like Nathan said, done by Christians? Does that mean that Christ is Lucifer? Do you see? It's just a rabbit hole. It's all a case of subjectivity. My tribe's leader is better than yours, and the commands that he gives me are just. And the other guy is saying exactly the same thing. And the truth is, for anybody out there who doesn't know, Luciferians think that Lucifer is the good guy and the tyrant is God. They genuinely believe that. They believe that Lucifer was not the snake trying to coax into a trap so that the beings would be eternally damned. They say the Christians represented the snake, or the Jews, the bad guys, the guys who were on the side of God. This is what the Luciferians say. Change the story so that instead of the Lucifer, the angel in charge of looking after the humans, instead of Lucifer saying, hey, you know, you can have a nicer life if you start wondering about things. Instead of that, they say they made him into this evil thing. Okay. Truth is, both camps think the other camp's God is the bad guy. Like, genuinely. Now you have the Satanists with the satanic rituals. So you have Luciferians. They're not Satanists. Satanists are different. There's a crossover, but there's a difference. Satanists have rituals, bloodletting, all kinds of weird shit. Okay. Luciferians, it's more like a cerebral religion, if you will. And the Luciferians kind of branch off to the simulation hypothesis, where Lucifer is the guy who sets everything up, separate from the tyrant God, figured out how to be ruler of universes, and bestows godhood on those who pass, who qualify. Okay. That's why Luciferians are Luciferians. Okay. They want to qualify and become rulers, gods of their own universe. Think about this, people. This is completely delusional. Now let's look at the other side. You have Yahweh, or God, saying, if you do all of these things, and if you don't do these other things, you qualify. And if you qualify, you get a room in my house. That's what it's saying. So it's like, wait a second. Are we supposed to understand that the things that created and orchestrated all of the energies has a house somewhere? And that house has so many rooms that everybody gets a room? Do people get to room share? What about the rest of your family? And these are rabbit holes. We are ascribing human qualities and tendencies to things that we don't understand. I think it's the same as saying electricity said, if you do everything right, you can have a place in my orchard. Does electricity have a freaking orchard?
Yeah, total nonsense.
Yeah, but that's what it is. That's really what it comes down to. It's.
But again, back to Bernays, we defer to authority, and we're tricked in. I shouldn't smile. I should be outraged, but it does make me laugh. But we're all tricked into a certain form of Satanism with NASA. So because we all buy the heliocentric model, or in the case of flat earthers, we did. And I was going to tie this in the end. I'll tie it in now. So you've got Mark Sargent bringing forward, and I'm not suggesting for 1 second that Mark Sargent is some sort of Freemason, not at all. But when he put forward his original model, which has sort of spanned into simulation hypothesis, you've got the idea of God, we're under the dome, the firmament, all of this religious text that points us towards it. But then on the flip side of that coin, in the standard accepted rhetoric of the heliocentric model, we're given NASA and the NASA Freemasonry, and this leads you to devil worship if you want to believe in it. You know, if you want to buy into it and scratch those surfaces and go down those rabbit holes, Red's rhetoric, you know, essentially you've bought into the Freemasonic devil worship of NASA and the heliocentric model. And that brings me to, you know, what I was going to link it in at the end, which is the flat earth and globe earth paradigm. We are currently arguing amongst ourselves about essentially God or the devil. You've got the devil of the NASA worshipping Satanists and Freemasons that promote the heliocentric model, and the God believing Christians and various other religions with their flat earth models in their texts. Well, what we are, or what Antonio and I are trying to get across to our audience, is that that's just another paradigm. That's just another part of the Hegelian dialectic. It's part of keeping us fighting amongst ourselves. The fact that the earth is just flat has nothing to do with any of this nonsense. That's just a fact. The cause of us questioning or looking or discovering ourselves, with ourselves, through ourselves, is a knock-on effect of being lied to by certain individuals who have figured out how we tick. Bernays, Freud, the list goes on. And those people have manipulated us. Now, waking up to that has only been facilitated by a certain trigger. The fact that the earth has no curvature, the fact that it is flat, obviously and observably. And this has had a knock-on effect, the bigger realization. And when we say people don't get flat earth, this is kind of what we mean. People would hear that statement and go, well, I do get flat earth. It's flat. I understand it. I understand all of the, you know, I understand how a gyroscope works and how it proves it. And I understand that water is always, you know, flat when at rest. You know, I get those concepts. It's like, well, that's just scratching the surface of flat earth if you want to put it in that little box. In reality, it makes you look at more stuff, realize your own inner potential, do more things, experience more of life, stop deferring to authority. But this, again, falls short on a lot of people because they just want to go and chuck stones at the walls of the authority, when you can literally just turn your back on them. You can ignore them. You can turn off your TV set. You don't have to suddenly go down to the TV station and set it on fire. You know, set your own TV on fire symbolically if you like. But
yeah, but also so we understand that authority is illegitimate, and we have people that call themselves flat earthers saying, what are our leaders, flat earth leaders, going to do about stuff? It's like, dude, how many times do we have to explain that nobody actually has authority? Will you stop claiming that people have freaking authority?
That just reminds me, sorry to interrupt, on the Dan Pratt video where he critiqued your critiquing of the Bible. He was essentially saying, when is Nathan going to release the data for the tracking the sun? And I thought, you probably haven't even watched it. There's conclusions all the way through it if you watched it, but people want to defer to authority. It's like another person said, when are you going to release the data? It's like, it was done live. That is the data. Just look, just go and watch. You know?
And not only that, but it's like, whoa, hold on a second. Let's just take a minute and look at what's being asked. Nathan and I discuss something. We mull it over. We then discuss it with Robin Poe, who's a Christian, a lovely person. Not because she's Christian, and not despite of it, but. And we think, hey, we could actually do this. We could set a hangout that rolled 24 hours and have people calling in from all around the world showing the sun rising or setting. And we had all kinds of other suns. But anyway, this is what Nathan and I did, not as leaders, just as human beings that have power. Just like you listening have power. You can use it or not use it. It's up to you. But Nathan and I discussed this. We think, hey, this could actually happen. Then Nathan sets about teaching people how to host hangouts, how to set things up, how to run things, spends 24 hours awake so that he can jump in if anybody's struggling or if there are any problems. We have this 24-hour long session of people showing sunrises and sunsets and a whole bunch of other stuff that didn't actually help anything, but the sunrises and sunsets did. Now, 24 hours of it. That's what we did. That's what everybody who either hosted or joined and showed their sun, even if it wasn't a relevant sun, okay? All the people who participated, that's what we all did. Now, people are saying, thanks for doing that. Can you now use up 24 hours of your time reviewing this stuff? Or maybe you want to speed up the play so you can skip and then rewind and annotate, take notes of all the pertinent sunrises and sunsets, put it all together and spoon feed it to me, please. And we're saying, excuse me, but at which point are we allowed to say to you, I know that we're allowed to say it from the go because there's no authority, at which point would it be okay for us to say, fuck off, you freaking imbecile? Excuse me for saying imbecile, but what the fuck? How about you sit with a pen and a pad and take down the data? How about you do it? I've done portion of it. It's freaking tedious, okay? It really is. It's not easy. It takes a long time and it's tedious, okay? So where are all these people who are asking for where the data is? Where is their data? Why haven't they watched it? Taken down the times, the locations, the angles.
I have an answer. I know where they are. They're on the shortened version that I hope I don't butcher his name, but Giorgiaka, if I said that right. He did a shortened.
Dorje Daka.
Dorje Daka. He did a shortened version, and I stuck that up on my channel. I mirrored it. And then people will come to a random video I've just published. Where's your sun tracking data? And I go, have you even watched the footage? Because they're like, oh, there was no conclusions to it. It didn't prove a thing. And you're like, what? Are you having me on? There was loads. It was literally, I remember at one stage, I was pretty tired, but Robin had a globe out. There was two people doing it there and then, showing suns where they shouldn't be. She's pointing it out live. It was awesome. But you've got to actually watch it to see that. But these people haven't. But then they'll critique you. What's the conclusion? It's like, well, the conclusion is the sun's close and it isn't feasible that it does what it does on a globe. You know, that's a pretty simple conclusion. But people don't want to watch it actually happen. That would take up far too much time. Forget the week and a half of slog that to achieve that. But, you know, forget that. Where's your shortened version? Like you say, why haven't you gone through it and spent 4 days, you know, further to the week and a half of solid planning and, you know, endless adverts and hangouts and test runs and bloody God knows what else.
Thanks for the free work. Now, can you do some more free work? They say, oh, no, you do some freaking work.
But it's not even like they have to do any work. I mean, if you just watch those sun tracking videos, literally, if you watched one for about a couple of hours, I reckoned, an hour and double speed if you're watching it on a PC, you could see something happen that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You just got to watch it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not hard.
No, and by the way, let's say Nathan sat and plotted everything out, okay? Jotted all the details down. We put it on an azimuthal corrected map, okay? I've already explained that this map behind has the Tropic of Cancer missing the Gobi Desert. So this map corrected so that the Gobi Desert is in the Tropic of Cancer, okay? Now, once that's done, let's say Nathan has taken everything down, has plotted everything, the times, Then what? He puts it out there. People just go, oh, okay, interesting, thanks for that. Or Nathan says, this is what I've done. This is the Oakley map. And then people immediately say, oh, he did it all for fame. It's a non-winning game, and we don't have to play. No, but we don't have to play. You can't coax us into playing a game that we've not signed up to play. We are doing what we would like to do, not because of do what thou wilt, but because we think it's a good thing to do. We're doing it. We're having fun. We're enjoying it. We're making strides. Okay. I'm going to mention Cami now. So Cami, Bob Shanadude 60, his wife is coming on tomorrow to discuss the map. But anyway, so that would be cool. Let me wrap this up with this little segment. Authority doesn't actually exist unless you create it. Okay? It doesn't actually exist. We know this. Okay? We know that we can tell a child or an animal to not do something, and the child can do it anyway, or the animal. We don't have authority. Then we use force to stop that, which is how the world works. Okay, we have the authorities, and if you don't do what they say, eventually it comes down to force. Okay, like they said in a Quest for the Holy Grail, come and see the violence inherent in the system. Okay, when the guy refuses to collect mud for the guy who says that he's the king. Okay, so if you don't observe authority, if you don't believe in authority, if you don't give other people authority, there isn't any authority. There is still stuff that happens. There is still death. There's still disease. There's still love. There's still happiness. But that has nothing to do with authority. So don't give authority to me or Nathan or anybody else to do stuff for you. You do it yourself. You're a flat earther. It means you can see through bullshit. Okay? That's what being a flat earther is. We can see through bullshit. So Res Rhetoric can't see through bullshit. So he can't understand that the sun, in his own version of the globe Earth, moves through space. He can't understand this. So when you ask a question like, does it move through space? He's like thinking, wait, well, I've got equations for when you're talking about it static, and I've got equations for when you're talking about it moving. And somehow it's both at the same time, because in the universe, there's nothing that's actually isolated. So you can't isolate the sun from movement.
Yeah, depends where you're standing. It's all relative.
Yes. So this is the thing. What relativity did was smear a layer of bullshit on real physics. There is real physics and real physicists. There really are physicists who really are physicists. These people look into real energies, real phenomena. And I say the word phenomena in the old sense, which means event that happens, okay? Or events that happen. So that really happen in the real world. This is what Tesla.
Now this is going to be dodgy because I've got two subject lines to go on to.
Okay.
Both tie into what you've just said. So I was going to go on to 9/11 and how we won't get to the bottom of it, but that being intentional, but also about faceless potatoes and credibility. So you've got events. You've just specifically said that events happen and events are real. And by the way, we're going to talk about 9/11, which is an event that there's lots of confusion and etc. etc. But before we do, I'd rather go on to sort of credibility, because after, again, a very sleepless night, I started commenting on your mirror of the debate you had with Red Rhetoric. And it should have been Poncho's Pete moment, but the selfish sods that just sat in there and said nothing other than giggling and interjecting and muting people just sat there and let the guy who's supposed to be debating disappear so you could come on. It was like, what? One of you miserable sods.
Let me explain this for any viewers who didn't catch it or who don't know what Nathan, the specifics of what Nathan is talking about. Poncho Pete said to me, hey, I'm in this debate. It's great. Come in. Okay. So I go in and I can't get in because all the slots are taken. There's only a limited number of people that can be in a hangout. 10. So There are 10 people there, okay? So the people, the globelings there, none of them will leave. None of the people sat there doing nothing, not talking, not showing anything. These guys are just there to take up a slot. None of these will leave. So Poncho leaves and I go in. Later, Poncho wants to come back in. And at some point, somebody has dropped, and very quickly, Lady Ganja, really lovely, sweet girl, jumps in. Okay? I think I've not spoken to her properly about it, but I think that she jumped in to take up a slot for flat earthers. So if somebody wanted to jump in and debate, she could do a relay. So drop out whilst they dropped in. This happened. I contacted her, said, Pete wants to come back in. Can you drop? Okay. I said it on the Hangout to her, but she was muted, and I think she was talking to her lover boy, Isa Mahal. But anyway, so she didn't hear. So I typed it to her in Skype, and she said, oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize. So she dropped. Before I had time to tell Pete, she's dropped, jump in fast. Another Globeling jumped in there and didn't say a freaking word. Okay. This is what happened. These were the tactics that they were using. Okay. Because they can't handle more than one flat earther. Although they did, sorry, I say this. Hank Hill did a freaking formidable job. Hank Hill did a formidable job. And they were finding it very difficult to deal with what he was saying. They were talking around circles and they were doing all kinds of stuff, and he was seeing what they were doing. There's a place where it's absolutely sublime. He describes the curvature maths. Res Rhetoric says that doesn't apply because you're talking about sea level. And Hank Hill says, well, isn't the sea level also curved? And then Res Rhetoric says, well, yes. So it doesn't apply even though there is curve. It's just,
he said that the curvature of the sea follows the curvature of the earth, after saying that when you're talking about sea level, you only reference it to sea level because it has nothing to do with the curvature.
Yes. So what these guys do is, okay, let me start from a different avenue. There's a guy called Nassim Haramein.
Double speak, isn't it? It's double speak. Yes,
yes. And double think, okay? Nassim Haramein explains how in the book Gravitation, which is by Wheeler, anyway, Gravitation, a big, thick physics book with all the laws of gravity, of physics, of theoretical physics, okay? Remember, there's theoretical physics and then there's real physics, okay? Where they actually measure how fast things fall, measure what force they impact. These guys, the guys that do useful stuff, like develop cars that won't kill you when you crash, you know, given a certain type of impact and speed and whatnot, right? Those physicists, real physicists. Then you have the theoretical physicists. And what they do is they develop theories for isolated systems. And what Nassim Haramein explains is that in gravitation, it says every law stated here is correct and exact for any isolated system. So when we're looking at light, it's absolutely correct and exact for light when light is isolated to thought alone. When we're looking at weight, this, so gravity. When we're looking at various different things, an orbit, when you isolate the orbit, which is why Red kept trying to say, are you talking about this type of motion or that type of motion? Because it's compartmentalized, it's isolated.
Yeah, it's basically saying, are you talking about the heliocentric system with the sun at the center, or are you talking about the galactic center?
Yes, he's trying to isolate it. And he says, or somebody says, it's like, because I asked, is the sun static? And then I had to move on to say, is the sun moving? Okay. Because I say, relativity. The sun could be static in respect of a steering wheel and the driver, and that steering wheel is static compared to the driver. Well, as long as the steering wheel doesn't actually steer, in which case it has to turn this way, so it moves. Oh, in terms of distance away from the driver, why distance away from the driver? Why not distance away from the ground? So they say, well, this is what's happening, okay? They can't answer a question that involves the driver and the steering wheel moving and the hitchhiker seeing them move and say the driver thinks the steering wheel is not moving. It's just gibberish, okay? The driver is moving. He knows this. We'll see if he thinks they're moving or not when he hits a wall. Let's see whether they were or were not moving. But anyway, that's a tangent. There are no isolated systems in the entirety of the universe. This goes back to the great mystery. Nothing is isolated. So you can't isolate something and describe it. If you do that, what you've done is you've come up with a falsehood. You have said, I'm going to take this thing, which cannot be isolated, and I'm going to, in my mind, isolate it, and in my mind, come up with answers, and then I'm going to say that those answers apply to this thing, which cannot be isolated.
He said it. Red did it. He said, well, the equations dictate that. And you were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Dictate? Yes. Dictate? No, yeah. There's an event, and you can use equations to explain, but they're a method of explanation. They're not a cause.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't want this to be a big rant about res rhetoric, but that poor guy, okay. Oh, Punch P told me something really interesting. Res rhetoric is an anagram of horrid secret. Just, you know, so people know. So he won't show.
That's the bit where I want to leave on then, because it was the bit we opened with, which is about credibility of these people. So you open that little section by saying, why haven't you got your camera on? And I would expand on that further and say, well, what's your name? Now, people would say, well, people are entitled to privacy. It's like, well, yeah, I have got privacy. Not this second. People are looking into my lounge, but they're not looking into my bedroom. You know, not looking into my bank account. I do have privacy, despite the fact that I'm a public broadcaster, and so are you. You have a degree of privacy, and it works the same right up to the Prime Minister or whatever celebrity you want to name. They still have a certain degree of privacy, even though they use their name. But they use their name so that you can check that they're not a complete fraudster, that they haven't been convicted of rape, that they haven't, you know, whatever the crime you want to name.
They could have a forged birth certificate.
Correct. But the point is, in the comments of that, I said, well, you know, when you go to a court, and the reason I used a court as an example is because we are presenting evidence. So in a court, you raise your right hand, and many people wouldn't know the reason why you do this. Sorry, this. But yeah, the reason you do that is because back in the day, you would be branded with your crime. So if you're a thief, you'd have literally a brand, a scorch mark on your hand that had the letter T. So when you held your hand up in court, you could show the court what your crimes were, what you had been branded. So by hiding...
Or that you didn't have any crimes.
Yeah, exactly. So if you hold up your right hand and your palm is clear, you are more credible than somebody who's testifying in a rape case who holds up their right hand and they're a convicted rapist. You know, it's fairly simple, straightforward stuff. And there's consequences. So you stand there and you give your name. If your name's not right, there's a consequence to that because you are presenting evidence. Now, the people on YouTube, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that everybody has to give out their name. Far from it. But you're entitled to question who these people are when they are presenting you with certitude, or back to the original subject matter, which is when somebody who is essentially buying in wholeheartedly what an authority has told them, then you have to question who these people are and what their motivation is in doing so. We're not exactly towing the standardized line by saying the earth is flat. We've got every reason to stay anonymous. But we're cool. We're happy.
Because we don't accept we don't have fear of authority, fear of other people's opinions. All of these qualities, we don't have fear regarding these things. They do. My reason for asking about why they weren't displaying camera, one, was I picked up on what you and I did one time in a chat there where we were asking Red what his name was, why he wasn't displaying camera. Was he a coward? All of this. It was a couple of
banned me from chat because I was asking him repeatedly what his name was.
Yes. So I saw that it was something that he felt very precious about. Okay. Fine, you feel pressures about it, but say why you feel pressures, not just do it and think that you can go into a public forum like YouTube and say, okay, I'm in this public forum, but I want to be private. It's like, okay, that's totally fine. That's what all of the people who are watching and not commenting are doing. That's precisely what they're doing. They're engaging with a forum in a completely private manner. Now, once you start engaging, you've kind of forfeited. Now we know Red's voice, for instance, okay? So we can take Red's voice and say, compare it to a response from SpaceX or NASA, you know, Ready or whatever. We can compare, we can do voice analysis, but he won't show his face. Is he afraid of here's the word afraid. Is he afraid of flat earthers? Is he afraid that his bosses will fire him for sticking up for what they ascribe to? That doesn't seem likely. What is he afraid of? So he won't give his name. Okay. He won't show his face. Okay. Now he has the leeway to be rude, to mute people, because you can't see his face. So he can mute. And unless you're in the Hangout, you don't know who's muted you or who's muted the speaker. Poncho Pete was muted more than he was allowed to talk, much more. So was I. A lot more of the time that I spent in that Hangout, I was muted by Red's rhetoric. But I can see it in the Hangout. It tells you muted by Red's rhetoric. But the viewers don't. They don't see it. They just hear Red talking. Now, if we were seeing Red talking, we would see him go mute. We would see him look down and find the mute button. Okay, that's what would happen. This is the anonymity they want. This is the safeguard they want. Or to say mute to an assistant who stood there silent. We don't know. Okay, so this is the anonymity that they hide behind. This is why they hide behind the anonymity. So they can get away with doing stuff that's totally unacceptable in a debate. Now, if you went to a debate at your local town hall, you had somebody pro-fracking and somebody anti-fracking. And you went there with you. Lots of people went. And there's the stage and the mayor. And here talking for the anti-fracking is Jeremy Cuthbone. And there he stands with his beard and his sandals. Okay. And here, arguing for fracking is X.
Is a blank screen with an audio track from somebody behind this wall.
That's it. He's behind the screen. You can't see him. You can hear him. Okay. You don't know that it's just him. You don't know whether he's there with a bank of computers or whether he's got assistants. You don't know anything about this, okay? Why is that person hiding in a public forum? This is the thing, the word public, it kind of the antithesis to the word private, you know? That's basically what it is. Now,
there's a reason, and I like this story because it's how I kind of got online. And I'm from a background in computing. My parents were in computing from the 80s. You know, my dad was a programmer. And by the time they flogged their business and I was into my teens, we were all offered this business. You know, we all just said no, we hated computers by that stage. But I was given, when they sold that business, a brand new computer, which I chucked in a cupboard and it never got used. But then I started working at this hi-fi shop and a guy called Sam asked if I used a computer. And this was when, you know, the internet was fairly young. And I said, well, yeah, but I'm not that interested, and gave the reasons I've just given now. And he came around and wired it up and took an AOL disk and put it in and showed me instant messenger and showed me chat rooms and forums. And the basic structure of what I'm describing is exactly the same as what we have now on YouTube. The only difference being we have live video. Now, to the ends of when I was using AOL, it did have interactions on instant messenger with video. So you could kind of do this. It just wasn't broadcast. So in many ways, what we do now is pretty much exactly the same as that system of AOL. So that in mind, this Sam guy takes the computer that I've got stuffed in a cupboard, wires it up, gives me AOL, and says, what do you want your name to be? And I said, well, my name. And he's like, oh, no. You want to use a random name. You're going to call yourself, you know, whatever, random name you can come up with. I was like, well, no, I'd much prefer to just use my name. And having seen what he'd shown me about the chat rooms, people kept asking the same question in the 90s: ASL, age, sex, location. Everyone wanted to know who, what you were. That was the first question before photographs could be exchanged. You had to just detail what you look like. I was like 6'2", brown hair, and this is when you were chatting to people, etc., etc. Anyway, this guy Sam explains that by using a random name, you can chat to a random profile, and you can ask, look, I'll show you. He showed me. He goes to a random girl's profile, gets chatting with her on instant messenger, and starts asking her what she's wearing. What color are her pants? All this sort of, he's like, it doesn't matter. I'm anonymous. I can do what I like. I was like, well, I don't really like that. I mean, I'm quite up for the idea of meeting people online. I was single at the time. And it was at the time where if you met people online, you were a predator. You were grooming people if you were chatting them up. It wasn't like it was today with dating sites. You were grooming people. Anyway, the point is that I said, well, I would rather have some credibility. I'd rather my persona, if you want to call it that, was the same online pretty much as it is in real life. If I'm going to be rude to people and tell them to fuck off, like I quite frequently do in comments, I want my name there. I'm not going to, delete. It bugs me when people say you delete comments. Like, no, I'm quite content with what I say. I do think about it, even when I'm being really abusive. But I've got my name next to it. And that means that people can dig out my email address. If need be, they can dig out my address. It's not exactly hidden. People can track me down. I've got a history online. They can check. Someone mentioned about court, and I was like, well, I've been through court cases. I've published the results of those cases. You can find it. It's public information. All this stuff is easy to uncover for somebody who is named and has a face. For Red's Rhetoric, on the other hand, he can ask me what colour pants I'm wearing with total anonymity. And what's the consequence? 0. In other words, he has no credibility. He can do what he likes. He can get away with saying whatever he wants. And we shouldn't really give people who are giving us, according to them at least, important information about where we bloody live. Well, do you really want to give a faceless potato that kind of authority? Personally, no, I don't. I really don't have a watch, Red. I watched him because you were on there and Poncho Pete was on there. But generally speaking, I don't watch Red. I just don't give him any credence whatsoever. He's got no credibility.
Me neither. The last time I saw anything with him was when you and I went into the chat. That's the last time he bored me. It's just like, okay,
He's an angry dude. I mean, when we went in, he was talking about going into a McDonald's or something, and basically berating the manager because they'd forgot to give him a straw on the drive-through. And you're like, mate, whoa, life is so much more fun than you're having. You're miserable. You're a miserable sod.
What I think is really interesting is because you can't see him, lots of people assume that he's a rather intelligent 16-year-old or maybe 14-year-old. Once your voice breaks, you can be 13 and your voice breaks. So people assume that he's a teenager because of the way that he comports himself. He's not. He's in his 40s. He's like, well, Nathan, you're not in your 40s yet, are you? So, but is our kind of age. What's he doing hiding? What is he afraid of? If we saw him, then people would say, this gentleman of that age is behaving like an adolescent. Maybe we shouldn't pay very much attention to this person. There's obviously something wrong there. Otherwise, he would be behaving like an adult because he is an adult.
Just to give balance, right? I'm going to say this because I've heard people critique, or I've critiqued people for saying, don't watch him, he's a shill, or whatever. If you want to watch Red's Rhetoric, be my guest. We are not here to tell you what to watch or what not to watch. Do what you like, as far as I'm concerned. We are just discussing what we watch and what we like to watch, not telling anybody to do anything, just to add balance.
Yeah, but I will say again, if you're going to watch someone that doesn't have a face, that you can't determine how old they are, so you can excuse the behavior by thinking, oh, this person is just a little bit volatile because he's a bit young, probably not getting enough kind of sexy love. And, just a little bit pent up, a bit frustrated. But then you see that this person is an adult. You see things differently, which is why they don't want you to see them. The same with Gen Panda. They don't want you to see them. They can say that they don't feel confident enough. What are they afraid of? The reason for my question was not to ridicule them. It was to try to explain to them, this is a flat earth debate, okay? I wanted to bring into the debate the modes of thought and conduct that are dictated on the globe versus the modes of thought and conduct that are not dictated on the flat earth. There aren't any. People can do whatever they want. People can swear. People can be very clean and never swear. People can do whatever they want, okay? There's like a general natural law to it, which is you're not abusive to other people for no good reason. You don't attack other people for no good reason. That's kind of common sense. That's natural law. And it's the same in the real world, okay? The world outside of YouTube, okay? That's what I was trying to get to. They couldn't handle where I was going. They wanted to say that, well, they thought that because I show my face, I was demanding that they show theirs. No, I wanted to know what's the source of their fear. That's what I wanted to know, so that I could help them to understand that they don't have to succumb to this illusory fear.
Oh,
That was it.
aren't you sweet?
Yes, I am. So that was it, right? But that was why I was asking, and I tried to explain that, but they're all jumping over. Anyway, and then it moved on. And basically the guy was vexed because his little ploys and tactics didn't work. They didn't work. So eventually he was asking somebody else to take over and answer me. Somebody else to answer whether or not the sun travels through space.
Oh, if the sun is static or not.
First, he couldn't get to that. So I changed it to moving through space.
Yeah.
You know, the reason he couldn't answer the question about it being static in space is that he knows that there is nothing static in space, according to the globe model. There is nothing static. So is the sun static?
We're trying to bring that back to the initial point with the contradiction between centripetal and centrifugal forces.
Yeah. Well, this was the thing. I asked, is the sun static? For some reason, people assume that I'm a bit of a dim person, you know. Sometimes I can understand why. But I have interests in things, and I get not obsessive, but passionate. I would say passionate is a lovelier word than obsessive, compulsive. So I get into things. One of the things I got into was astronomy, how things happen, theoretical physics, how things happen. So astrophysics is the specific field of this. And there is no thing that is static ever at any point in the universe. So I asked, having mentioned centripetal versus centrifugal, if the sun was static, knowing that his answer had to be no, because he knows there's nothing static, but instead he started clamoring. So I said, okay, let me change it. You know, make it a bit easier for him. Is it moving? And that's when he said, right, now I can declare that you have to specify either this or this. That's what he was doing, because he couldn't answer, was it static? Because he can't. If he says, no, it's not static, then the question I've broached about centripetal versus centrifugal force kicks in. And they can't do that. It has to be isolated. Each thing has to be isolated for the theory to have an equation, because otherwise the equation runs on to infinity. You cannot have something that's linked to motion of other bodies, to time, to distances, to everything that's involved in motion of galaxies and planets and asteroids and all of these things out there in the globe model universe.
I was going to say, according to the teachings.
Yes, the equation does not end. This is a thing. The equation doesn't end, because by the time you finish writing about a specific thing, that specific thing you finished writing about now has a different quality to it. And the equation would have to have ramifications rather than be linear. Okay, it would have to branch off to include spin, to include pull, all kinds of stuff that makes their model a farce. Oh, let me just add this, and then we'll get back onto the topics you were saying. So first of all, their model is a farce, okay? And people that are intelligent and can see this, see it's a farce. I'll let everybody here hear a simple thing that you can mention to the next brainy people who know about orbits and stuff. Ask them what a theory requires in order to qualify as a valid theory. Their answer should be falsifiability, which means a theory has to have at least some logical way in which it could be proven false. At least logical. Some way of, do things fall? Yes. Is there a way of proving whether this is absolutely true? Yes. Well, how could we prove it? By doing all these things. How can we disprove it? Well, if there was something that we let go of and didn't fall. Okay. So this makes the theory a valid theory. The Big Bang theory is not a valid theory because it is not falsifiable. There is no logical thing that could demonstrate that it's false. So it is not a valid theory. So all the people who think that Stephen Hawking and Einstein and Lemaitre were these geniuses, stop to think. They're talking about a theory that is ipso facto invalid. It is not a theory in the standard and strict sense of the term theory. If it is not falsifiable, it is fantasy. You can't falsify how many marbles Gandalf had in his pocket. You cannot prove that he didn't have 17. You cannot prove that. Now, if I develop a theory saying Gandalf had 17 marbles in his pocket and develop a long equation about it, if nobody can falsify this, it's not a theory. It's merely fantasy. And that's what the Big Bang is.
Yes, like so much of our science fiction that reinforces the ideas of men with lightning coming from their fingers. We have to defer to something, Antonio. Let's face it, we need answers.
Yes.
And this brings me on to the next subject, which is a flat earth related subject, and one that I'm quite pleased or chuffed with myself because of my attitude towards it from the outset. And the subject matter is Antarctica, which is a nice hot subject at the moment, especially with Robert Shortman being a bit more prevalent and doing videos and coming forward after his Antarctic escapades, shall we call them?
Wait, can I just do this? Because you just said it's quite a hot topic, and I want to do Antarctica. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that a lot of the flat Earth information, and indeed the Antarctic and the Antarctic Treaty, sort of ties us in a way of thinking that the Antarctic or the ice shelf or the ring of the puddle that we live in is this place that needs to be explored. So we're kind of led down a path that makes us want to explore this area, this desolate area. And we're fairly convinced that in most instances, a lot of us would die in doing so. Not necessarily because the conditions are so harsh, because Robert Shortman has pointed out that with acclimatization, you can probably, as your average Joe, survive down there fairly easily. However, he had a few things in his back burner to keep him alive, and they were primarily things like fuel, something that the Antarctic Treaty stops us from. According to it, it's black and white. We're not supposed to have fuel down there.
And not just, sorry, Nathan, not just fuel, but stockpiles of fuel.
Yeah, you
So
can't
not
have it anywhere near the place, according to the Antarctic Treaty. It's within miles of the coastline, let alone on the actual land. So you can't take fuel down there, you know. But we're led to believe that this could be where the dome is or whatever. You know, there's stuff that we need to be discovering down there. We've even got propaganda from Bird telling us that there's, you know, paradise beyond, you know, the ice ring, and, you know, there's this temperate zone with all these wonderful things that we could find. I am going to speculate, based on what Cami has said to us, that there is a off-grid area that has more land, and potentially, you know, land that could be the same sort of climate as here in Britain or wherever, you know, just average global land, you know, in terms of where people habitate. What's the word?
inhabit.
Inhabit, that's the one. So yeah, so where the inhabited zones are, there could be more of them beyond what we see or travel along, because of the magnetic field lines that dictate how our mapping has been formulated and how travel is done on these curved magnetic field lines. So based on this, there could be an extra huge area that we're told is just the, you know, an ocean on the other side of the globe that's not really important. You know, planes get lost there all the time, but that's nothing to do with GPS, and, you know, it's turned off in those areas or whatever shit they give us. But there could be an area that's got more land and could destroy the whole notion that, you know, they're not making any more of it. You know, we see in these the land of creation in Hawaii, you've got literally volcanoes spewing out land. You know, there is a potential for more of that type of activity beyond that point. The point I'm trying to get to is that we are all led to this journey to Antarctica, a journey, in my view, that would lead us all to our deaths. You know, when asked, would you go down there to find the dome? Hell no is the answer. You know, I value my fingers was always the response. You know, yes, anybody who wants to go down there, more power to you. You know, I will support you. I'll be there in spirit. But really, you know, I value life genuinely. And would I want to go down there? No, is the answer. Would I want to go to a nice temperate area? Yes, definitely.
So if people forced ahead, went there, found lovely area, totally, and no tribes there to kill or anything like that, okay? And brilliant, lots of timber, lots of forest in that flat world. So would you then go over?
What if they found it?
Yeah.
Haven't given it much thought. If you mean if Bird was right, is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah. Or the Iron Republic.
Still a potential of death on the journey, though, isn't there?
Well, yeah. Let's say they said, okay, this is what we have. It takes 5 hours from the Falklands by plane.
Well, then that's as easy as going to anywhere else that's crossing a horrible bit of land. You know, then it's just easy peasy. You just buy your ticket. I'd have no reason not to.
Exactly. And hence the Antarctic Treaty.
Oh, sorry. I see where you've led me now. I'm a bit slow at the moment. Yes. No. Okay. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So why sell it on just, you can just go to this area. Much better to lock the thing down and surround it in controversy, and, you know, guns drawn if you get anywhere near the place, and a whole load of rules and regulations to stop you going down there and make you think that you're going to die if you do. Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely ingenious, especially if there's other places that are much more easy to find.
With governments that run things very smoothly and fairly, like the Iron Republic says. Let's say that's the case.
Like the Americas, let's keep it in the realistic, something that we can actually quantify. So I explained this to my wife. You know, they arrive in America, the New World. Up until then, you've got the Map of Monday. This is what we have. It's enclosed in a circle. This is it. You find the New World, and it's inhabited. It's not like they've found somewhere that wasn't in existence. It was there. There's people there. They're living peacefully. They're not as developed in the Western opinion. You know, but ultimately speaking, the Westerners come along and they wipe them all out and say, this is our new world. Well,
yeah,
no.
Let's include an extra element. These people who are living there, they're not as technologically advanced as to have sail ships and cannons, but they know how to survive the winter, okay? And they do survive the winter. And they see that the pilgrims have run out of food, because some of them took, like, you know, 400 pairs of shoes, and just stupid things, okay? So instead of food, so they were eating the leather. So the natives there see that these poor, weak, sick-looking people, because let's face it, pale people, so people who are not pale, look sickly, especially if that's kind of the first time you see them, kind of thing, right? But anyway, so they go and help them out, okay, and they survive. Brilliant. What happens next year? That's the reason they have Thanksgiving, okay? So they have Thanksgiving. They brought them turkeys and they survived. Brilliant. Now, the next year, what did they do? Did they plant and grow stuff and have a big festival and invite the natives? No. They went and killed the natives and stole their stuff. The same natives that had helped them survive. So maybe the whole Antarctic Treaty is not imposed by us. Maybe it's imposed by people out there who are native, but who are not defenseless.
Sure. I mean, that very well, we can speculate that, but within the realms of what Cami has shown us, excuse me, there's very high potential for just more normal land. Now, if you're the controlling interest in the current land, then you don't want any more land. You wanted to keep it in scarcity. It's like the whole idea with the diamonds. You know, you can't have them lying around and worthless. If you want to give them value, you have to create scarcity. So the same principles would apply to the land. Now, yes, we could travel to a different puddle, but if the powers that be have locked stuff up in our own back garden, wouldn't it be much more sensible to just access that first?
Yes, of course. So
Yeah,
there's what. Oh, Nathan, let me just ask you a question. Sorry to, you know, break the fourth wall kind of thing. I have a plane. I have my window open and a plane, and is it playing through?
No.
No. Okay, cool. I don't need to shut the window then. Okay.
No.
So you had other topics that you wanted to cover that were really cool.
Well, one of them was 9/11. I mean, I'll just get to straight to the point of it. I mean, I think when we use the Life of Brian example, which is to say, I'll give a brief idea of what's happened up until this point in Life of Brian for anybody who hasn't watched it. So Brian's being crucified, and the people have been asked at a different location who is to be released. So they're going to release one prisoner who's being crucified. And they come to the conclusion that Brian of Nazareth, the main character, should be the one who's released. So the guards go to the crucifixion site and say, we have orders for the release of Brian. Now,
in the meantime, Brian's engaged in an argument with a group of other people who are demanding that the Swedish not be crucified with the Welsh and all kinds of stuff. So he doesn't hear we've got the release orders for Brian. He doesn't.
So Brian is distracted, in essence, when they tell the people that there's release papers for Brian. And the guy next to him perks up and says, I'm Brian. So quick as a flash, they start cutting down that guy. And Brian realizes he's overheard, but he hasn't registered. He's too engrossed in his argument. He then says, I'm Brian. And then the guy behind him realizes what's happening and says, no, I'm Brian. Before you know it, the entire crowd is saying, I'm Brian. Now, my point is that one guy in that crowd really is Brian. He's not lying, but he's never going to be heard. Now, in the case of false flags, hoaxes, however you want to describe the events like 9/11, Sandy Hook, that I won't go through the full list, but these events have to be engineered in such a fashion that the conspiracies roll out immediately. In other words, back to your Russian vid saying that nothing is overlooked, it's all pre-planned. The same principle goes with all of the nonsense and the conspiracy theories that are 9/11. Now, that's not to say that there isn't the Judy Woods out there that have got the right answer. Then that may very well be the case, but they are drowned in a sea of people shouting, I'm Brian. And unfortunately, that is deliberate. That's part of the system that at the beginning of the show, we said you can ignore. You don't have to be engaged in it. And we, right here, right now, just by talking about it, are propping up that very paradigm. We're talking about it. We're buying into that system. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to do this in order to expose it. It's a catch-22. But in the case, back to the beginning of the show, of Russian vids, when we discuss this stuff, when we expose the Freemasons' devil worship and their connections to NASA, there's a good reason why the people who we are supposed to be exposing will actually put people like Russian vids on the front cover. You know, they will put him in the headlines for this reason. It's because we're propping up that paradigm, unfortunately.
That's it. I urge everybody to download the PDF version of The Art of War. The Art of War is really well-written book. It's not Machiavellian. It's very simple, straightforward methods for not losing wars. So it gives you all kinds of strategies. The divide and conquer is there. That's where the Brits got divide and conquer. That's how they won the Indias. That's how the Brits won all the lands that they won. They used divide and conquer. So we're familiar with divide and conquer, but we're not familiar where it comes from, which is the art of war. The art of war doesn't say if you want to win a larger opponent, all you need to do is divide it and conquer it. No, it says you have to divide and conquer it. How you divide and conquer it is you cause confusion, and people will divide themselves. That's what the whole divide and conquer is. So you bring an element of confusion. So you say Bin Laden or whatever, you know, you say a bunch of stuff. The media says a bunch of stuff. Then people, the alternative media, says a bunch of other stuff. Some of that other stuff is counterintelligence, is placed there by the same people who placed 9/11 in the media, in the real world, and in the alternative media. Now you have confusion. Now you can divide and then you conquer. That's how it works. It's not just divide and conquer. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, how do you divide? No, you divide through confusion. So you have all of these extra elements, all of these people saying, I'm Brian. You cause confusion. Now, one of the things that's happening in the flat earth is we have people in the flat earth, and I'm not going to call people shills, okay? That whole shill thing dropped away when Ace McLeod started calling other people shills, the way black guys call each other nigger. You know, take away this thing, own it, okay? So he was calling me a shill, calling himself a shill, Nathan, everybody that he knew was a nice, good person, calling everybody shill. The shill thing just died, okay? Very good move, okay? Completely reversing the confusion that was dividing things. But there are people who, for whatever reasons, it could be mental health, it could be not mental health, basically, mental health, paranoia, whatever, who have this kind of urge to single out elements. So it's equivalent to people in the 9/11 truth movement singling out elements like thermite and talking only about the thermite, okay, and not about the big voids under the towers, the big holes under the towers, just the thermite. Now, there are people here in the flat earth who call themselves flat earthers, but don't behave very nicely and cause this confusion and division. And everything that we're seeing, for people who think, oh, this is not good, this is not good, it's fine. It is good when you think about it, because what's happening is people get to see people's true colors pretty quickly. That's it. You see their true colors. All that's actually happened is it has helped people to see clearly. And this is what I said before about flat earthers. We can see through bullshit. We have seen through the bullshit. We came across a video about flat earth at some point, watched it and thought, oh God, and suddenly you started to have a revelation, you know, like in the book of Revelations. By the way, when I say about God and Christianity or religions altogether, I'm not saying there aren't abilities to see the future. No, I'm not saying that there aren't extraordinary qualities that humans might have, prophetic dreams or all kinds of stuff. So I'm not saying that the whole of everything there is a bunch of bullshit. I'm saying a lot of it is, okay? But there's stuff in there that's very kind of, yeah, interesting. The Mayans had the same thing about the Revelations, only they didn't have hellfire and brimstone, okay? They had...
I'm going to jump in, Antonio, because there's going to be people who hear this and hear you talking about predicting the future and stuff. But I mean, we have kind of covered this on this show. So when you get things like you call it heliocentric entanglement, which I really like, actually. But when you talk about compartmentalizing things, or what was the phrase you gave earlier where you isolate things. So when you isolate things, that's very much a heliocentric way of behaving and thinking, more importantly. Whereas when you become a flat earther, you kind of the ones who get it at least, will see things in a more fractal manner. Now, that being said, you can visualize how things will turn out when you see things in a bit more of a fractal way. This is where things like dreaming about the quote unquote future, which isn't really how it is, but in literal terms, you could say, well, one person has had a dream about something that happened 2 days later, therefore they're predicting the future. Not really, but in the fractal way of our existence, you can see how these things are possible, but only when you detach your heliocentric ways of thinking. And this can apply to more things than just orbital mechanics, like with Red's rhetoric. You know, there are many different things in terms of the way we are programmed, the way our belief systems manifest themselves, which we are completely unconscious of. You know, we've just been trained. And unfortunately for me and Antonio, it may be different. This is my ham-handed segue into the next section. It may be different for the next generation, but for certainly us, and for anybody who's watching this, literally anybody who's watching this show and comprehending it, you have all had the same brainwashing. And I'm going to use those words deliberately. Is it one word, brainwashing?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to use that word deliberately, because we are literally brainwashed in the way everything we take in. Even when we stroll down the street and see a billboard, it's propagandized. It is deliberate. Russian vids is right. It's just that the exploration of that is also propagandized and designed to lead you down a certain rabbit hole. Again, we come full circle. But before we do, it's back onto the next generation. We have now unearthed an innate ability to look at things in a different way and explore for ourselves, as opposed to deferring to authority. And when it comes to, certainly, I've just had a kid, you know, when it comes to her education, I won't be teaching her that the earth is flat. I'll be teaching her to explore where she lives and come to her own conclusions. You know, it's the motto of Jeranism, you know, do your own research. And ultimately that will be, you know, my easy get out for, well, how will you educate your kid? Will you tell her about the globe? Well, thanks to Dave Weiss, she's got a globe in her crib, you know. Wow. But when I'm asked, well, what is this? Well, that's one way that people will explain how the world works, as opposed to that's the world. You know, it's just a different phrasing. But ultimately speaking, I think the next generation, because of flat earthers, God, this is grandiose, will just be taught to look at things slightly differently. Therefore, they may not have any revelation. The next generation may just see flat earthers fairly passé, you know, fairly indifferent, because they're looking at things differently from the outset. They're not going to have this flat earth revelation. We're quite lucky, if you want to look at it in that way, because we've been lied to. We can have this flash of inspiration. But the problem is that again, people call this a flat earth psyop. That's been propagandized. Like we say, you've got the religious aspects, the dome, the firmament, all of the religious, godly, in my upbringing, the Jesus-based texts, pointing you towards this power who can create things out of nothing, literally create men in his own image from dust. You know, that's God in the book. Well, the antithesis of that, the devil and his lightning fingered power, you know, all bullshit in my view. But that's the paradigm we're left with when we give him flat earth, especially a lot of the not promoted, but the popular stuff is given by Christians who have a very fundamentalist Christian belief.
Yeah, now there's a problem as well when we come upon the subject of religion, which we're talking about Russian vids, and it fits perfectly. God versus Lucifer or Satan. Satan basically means enemy, okay? So Lucifer, Satan is God. You know, God's Satan is Lucifer. Satan means enemy. That's what it literally means. It's not a name. It is Shaitan. It means enemy. So just like shalom means peace, you know, that's what it literally means. There are words that have literal meanings. So Satan means enemy. That's all it means. Now, when we think about the yin yang of the universe, with the good and the bad and these elements, which we anthropomorphize, we give qualities like beards and age, you know, an old man, a powerful old man. We depict, now the Muslims say is it's not only impossible to depict God, but it's illegal to even attempt to, because by doing that, you're lying. You have to be lying if you're portraying something that you say is at all like God. That's what the Muslims say. So when we're looking at sorry, I was going to say, when we're looking at this situation where we have good versus evil, and powerful and also powerful, everything powerful, and these qualities, we've fallen for a trick, and the trick is the trick of authority. That's what we've fallen for. It's not to say the trick itself is evil. It's not to say that falling for it is evil. Maybe evil doesn't exist. Maybe evil is subjective. Maybe the people who are bombing a village are evil to the people being bombed. But
all relative.
Relative, exactly. So this idea that we have, this devil idea, this Satan, this opponent, this adversary, all of these qualities that we have had these programmed into us. So rhetoric doesn't see me as a human being. He sees me as an enemy. This is what we do. Anybody who sees a difference that they object to in somebody else, they see that quality as the quality of an enemy. They don't see that quality in themselves, even when it's there, because half the time what people are seeing is a projection of their own psyche. Okay, so they see evil, and it's like, wait a second, let's consider things a little bit more clearly. We're flat earthers. We can see through bullshit. Okay, we can see that there isn't an entity that gives power to other people. That power morphs itself into words, gestures, signatures, suits, and authority.
But also, sorry, signs and symbols, and all signs and symbols that we talk about in this show are designed to lead you to Freemasonic worship and the bloody devil.
It's always the same thing, and it's always authority, authority, hidden hand. The Wizard of Oz. This is what it's saying. The Wizard of Oz is an amazing book. If you look at what it's saying,
I've got to ask you before I forget, because that's what I was going to interrupt you with. You said a word, anthropomorphize.
Give human qualities.
Right, make like human.
Yes, yes. So we anthropomorphize God, and we anthropomorphize Satan.
But we're told to, you know, God created man in his image.
Yes. So did God have an image? Was God a singular thing? Let's say no, because it's talking in plural. Let us make man in our image. Okay, so it's plural. Okay, that's understood now. Gods, plural. Bosses, chiefs. That's the meaning, Elohim. Okay, those are the bosses, the big honchos, the orchestrators. Humans are sat there thinking, how the hell are we here? What are we doing? What's going on? We must have been made. Well, yeah, my mother made me. No. Somebody must have made the first one. Okay, well, why did it make us like this? Well, because probably they are like this, and they made us like them. Well, why did they put the testicles on the outside? That's a bit inconvenient. Why didn't they make it so that sperm could survive in the temperature inside the body and not have to dangle around and get caught in brambles and thorns? You know, it's a bit of a handicap.
What are you doing with your testicles?
No, I'm just saying, it's a it's a bit of a silly move to give dangling testicles to a human that's pretty relatively weak compared to all the other creatures that can just swipe us to death, you know, with one smack, you know. So this idea of these qualities of God humanness, no. What if God is sound? Sound doesn't have a shape. It can make shape, but it doesn't have a shape. It can be translated through mathematics into shapes. It can be translated through technology into shapes. We've all seen the oscillating shape, which is actually this, but we see it from the side, so we see the wave. Okay, so that's sound. Sound doesn't have facial features. Electricity doesn't have facial features. These things don't have features that are human-like.
Are you saying God doesn't have a beard?
Yes, and he doesn't have dangling testicles. So the whole point is, when people like Russian vids, and it feels like we're going really hard on Russian vids, but
No.
the stuff he does is brilliant.
One of my favorite YouTubers. Sometimes I'll throw things at the screen saying nonsense.
Yes.
But that's why I love him. It doesn't. I'll just get this in actually. Jaren summed it up. Oh, I always defer to Jaren. He's great. Anyway, he was saying that off air, when Bob and he are discussing things, often they're challenging each other, saying no. I mean, we're exactly the same. If you listen into our conversations, I'm going, what the? It's like just then you were saying about an animal. No one will. I turned the multiple cameras off because there's just the two of us. But you were saying about an animal. I'm on the other end. No one can see this. Going, no. Animals don't just kill you with one swipe. What a load of nonsense. I'm not going to put. I wasn't going to put that into the show and have our usual, tete-a-tete where we debate these sorts of minor details. But that's what it's all about. And that's not in any way me seeing Antonio as my enemy because he thinks that animals can kill you with one swipe. That's far from us being enemies. That's in a way the highest sort of compliment, to challenge each other and question and all that sort of stuff.
The reason I said this, I'm going to defend my point because it's freaking just. Men can kill other men and women can kill other women with one single swipe. I mean, Qigong masters, Kung Fu, various different people can kill. We know that this is possible. Bears can definitely kill, and so can tigers, and so can gorillas. Not all. I'm pretty sure a gazelle can't kill a human with one swipe, because it can't articulate its arms that way. But there are creatures. And I was saying, to have testicles dangling on the outside of a male body is a hindrance if you're running away from a freaking tiger. What if that's the only bit he can catch? But anyway, so this made us in their image, this idea, this anthropomorphizing of things we have no clue of their qualities other than by their signature. We can see the signature, we can see growth, we can see decay, which is necessary for the growth. Everything is necessary for everything else. Oh, the heat, the light, the sound, the motion, the electricity, the magnetism, the ether.
So people don't anthropomorphize God. If they're going to take one soundbite from this particular mechanics of the fourth wall, God doesn't have testicles. You heard it here first.
That's it. And so this is what happens when you fall for the idea that God has testicles. You fall for the idea that Lucifer also has testicles, and that they don't really want to show each other their own penises because it might turn out that the other guy has got a bigger one. Okay, but they're pretty sure they show their friends their penis to say, yeah, you see, the other guy's penis is smaller than this one. And they both do that.
You've diffused this beautifully by boiling down God and the devil to them comparing cock size. I love it, Antonio. That's genius.
Well, this is what it is. That's what it comes down to, So we do this. We've been programmed to do this. We've been programmed to react to the world like this. We have evil things happen, and the evil is our judgment of those things. That's the evil. The thing that happened is an earthquake evil. No, it didn't happen with an intent to kill people. It just happened. Why did it happen? Don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying don't know. That's how you find answers, when you realize that you don't know things. If you think you do, it happened because Lucifer made it happen, because people over there didn't like that town and they cast a spell on that town and there was an earthquake. There you go. That's why it happened. Then you're not going to find out.
The events such as 9/11, this is back to men being evil, men making things happen. Because in the same vein as we say, well, we've realized our potential, not probably 1% of it, in fact, very little of our potential, but some of it at the very least is not completely locked away by the propagandized media. But we've realized some of our potential. Now, the powers that should not be, who have us believe they're you know, in a metaphorical way, can have lightning coming from their fingers, do take control of their inner abilities, and the doing is precisely what we see the end result of in the case of these events. You know, it doesn't matter which one, take your pick. It's all part of the stage that is our world, and they have realized this and manipulated it to the nth degree, seeing through it, dicing it up, talking about it endlessly. Unfortunately, that's buying into that particular system and turning your back on those things and just, you know, going out and you know, exiting the forest, as a topical reference in there. But yeah, you know, actually, you know, being able to see the wood for the trees is something that, as a flat earther, I feel that that's my privilege, but it's very internal. It's mine, and that's not to say I'm suddenly seeing myself as some bloody god. That's absolute nonsense. You know, it's just an innate ability that we all have.
That's it. That's what the programming is there for. Is to hide that innate ability. That's what the programming is there. Otherwise, people wouldn't obey authority. They would think, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this instead. You know, so along come the swords or the bullets. You know, it's very kind of simple. It's coercive. And the programming is done subtly so that people don't reject it immediately. If something is really obvious, people can reject it, you know. But if something's subtle, it's much more harder. It's much harder for them to reject it. So subtle programming happens. This subtle seeing the other as the enemy. You know, like Nathan said,
I've got to interrupt again. It doesn't necessarily have to be subtle, and it's the suspension of disbelief is a really powerful tool. And when we are immersed, the cinema experience, I love it. I mean, I'm a AV enthusiast, you know, I'm the biggest geek out there. But the cinema experience is a very it's one where you have to place yourself in the scene, but with good direction. There is no alienation of the audience. You can suspend disbelief when you see Star Wars. Now, as flat earthers, we know the whole concept of them traveling to these planets is complete bullshit. But when I wasn't a flat earther and I watched that happen, you still have to suspend disbelief in terms of some of the Ewoks and the various creatures and the craft and the plot. You know, the guy with lightning from his fingers. You have to kind of suspend disbelief, but that still registers. This is back to Bernays. They know this. It's predictive programming. If you're going to be required to come up with an answer off your own back, you're going to have to reference something, and all of the information that you're left with after these suspensions of disbelief, you're telling yourself that it's the lightning fingers, that we're saying, oh well, on a whole nother level, when you've scratched the surfaces, that's the idea you're left with God and the devil. But on the in your face level, they're literally traveling from planet to planet. It's so in your face. It's the whole concept of Star Wars. You know, it's not subtle. It's not hidden behind a layer of subliminal messages. It's the plot of the film. You know, it's so in your face, it's untrue. But that is something that you will refer to. So when we have these passionate outcries from people who are globalists because you've challenged their notions, it's because those are every neural pathway they have wired in their brain is wired towards that same exact place, the globe, the heliocentric system, planets, stars, traveling, light years, all of that stuff. It's every part of your fiber of being, because it's been, back to that word, brainwashed into you.
Yes. So when we have, for instance, people questioning things, and when they, globalists or globalings, don't know something, they assume that somebody else, cleverer than they, does know. So how do vaccines work? Don't know. People who know about vaccines must know. Or orbital mechanics. All of these things, other people must know. Okay, there are things that other people know, which is fair enough. This is true. We're accustomed to this. And then there are things that we're told that other people know. Okay, now that bit is belief. Okay, so in The Life of Brian, my favorite film, Brian asks his mother why women aren't allowed to go to stonings. And his mother says, it's written, that's why. Okay? There you go. That's it. Why do you think we're on a globe? It's written, that's why. Why do you think we're spinning through the universe? It's written, that's why. That's the answer. That is the answer. It's complicated with strange characters and, you know, and all kinds of little things to represent other things.
Back to red rhetoric. The equations say that.
Yes. It's like, it's written, that's why. It's like, no. That's not acceptable. You believing something because it's written, that's not right. And this is the same for the Bible and Russian vids, because it's written. The majority of people, this is a point I was going to go to before, but I got a bit distracted. The majority of people's idea of Lucifer or Satan doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from Milton, Paradise Lost, the explanation of how the battle happened between God and the devil, and the sentence that God cast on the devil, and how he was cast down, and how he became the prince of the earth. And all of these things are not in the Bible. They're in Paradise Lost, which was written by a blind man. He was blind by the time he wrote it. So he dictated it and his assistant wrote it. But the point is, it's written. That's why you believe it. Why do you think there's a devil? Because it's written. That's why. Like, come on, stop accepting stuff that you're told is written. It's not right. You're not being fair on yourself. So yes, the Bible says certain things about Satan, just Satan. It says certain things about Lucifer. If you want to deconstruct it, I love deconstructing it. It's brilliant. Here's God, makes everybody brilliant. Then says to one guy, hey, psst, can you hear me? Yes. Kill your son. Okay, son, come here. Why? Gonna kill you. Ah, no, don't kill him. Okay, you didn't kill him. Brilliant. Now I know that line of communication between you and I is open. Brilliant. Now you're gonna be my greatest leader. Go and tell everybody that I say you're my greatest leader. So he goes down, and his son has arrived down there first, freaking out, screaming to his mother that his dad was gonna kill him. Everybody's thinking, what's this commotion? Abraham was gonna kill Aaron. So, oh my God, what? So, I think it was Aaron. Anyway, so everyone along comes Abraham. Okay, he says, hey guys, God just said to me that I'm his representative. He just told me. Okay, and the people there are like, okay. There's one of them. Is there going to be a single person that says, I think you're talking shit. I think you've had mushrooms. I think you've not finished your trip yet. Nobody's going to say that. Why? Because they've just heard, one, that he's got a freaking knife, and two, that he was about to kill his son, and you're not his son, so it's much more likely to kill you, you know, without a problem. Now, on goes the story. The Jews are captured and taken to Egypt, even though the Jews didn't exist then. The Jews didn't exist until after the Exodus, not before. There's a bit of a blend going on there. There's some Jewish scholars.
Is that right?
Yes, there are Jewish scholars who wrote the Egyptian origins of the Hebrew people. They were called Hebrew, not Jewish, because they were from the Hebron. Okay,
this is from Paradise Lost.
No. We've left Paradise Lost. Now, Jewish scholars have determined that the Jews didn't exist. They just planted there sometime, at some point. And the traditions and the shawls and their rituals and their amen comes from Egypt. Basically, there was a revolution in Egypt, a civil war in Egypt, and people scattered like they do in civil wars in lands that are easy to escape through land bridges. Okay, so this is what people did. They buggered off. Some went to Africa, further down in Africa. Some went across towards the Middle East. Some settled in Palestine. That's what happened, like in the real world. Like historically, that's what happened. Now, separate to that, we have this suspension of disbelief idea of this God saying stuff to Abraham and stuff like that, which then goes on, the story of God talking to people, to Moses saying, hey, I want to go with them. They want to go. Let us go. And Pharaoh says, no. So God says, oh, tell him that if he doesn't let you go, I will kill all the firstborn of the Egyptians. So let's take a break. God made the Egyptians and made the people that want to leave Egypt. And now God's saying to one group, hey, tell that other group of pets of mine that I'm going to kill all the firstborns unless I let you go. Why not just teleport them out? Why kill all those people? It's nonsense. Now we'll go on to Job. Job is where Lucifer comes in. This is where Lucifer comes into the story. You have Satan, not Lucifer, Satan in the Genesis, not Lucifer, okay? Satan, the enemy, the snake, the serpent, okay? Later comes Lucifer. Lucifer goes to see God when God calls to him his sons of God. And along with them goes Lucifer. And God says to Lucifer, where hast thou been? And Lucifer says, I have been going to and fro upon the earth and walking thereupon. Now, how did God not know what Lucifer's been doing? Is he not omniscient? Was he trying to catch Lucifer out? What is this? What's going on? Well, I thought Lucifer was kicked out before. Because if he's going to and fro to the earth and visiting Job, then it means that that's after Adam and Eve. And the serpent was cast out from the point of Adam and Eve, wasn't it not? But never mind that. You now have this fantastical story about this guy called Job with no signature, so written by rhetoric, okay? No signature there. And this story about all these fantastical things that happened to this guy who defers to authority every single day, no matter what his misery, by giving the priest stuff for free. That's the sacrifice. Every day he makes a sacrifice means to the priest, not to a stone, not in the woods, not in the desert, to a priest. It was the priest that did the sacrificing, that burnt the Holocaust, which is basically the unwanted skin and bones and organs of the lamb, burning them. That's the Holocaust. That's what the word comes from. That's where it comes from. And that's what it is. The unwanted stuff from the lamb. Okay. And the meat goes to the freaking priest and his family. And who told this story about Job? The priest. It's priests that tell this story. If you've got everything going really well, give me stuff. And if stuff is going really, really bad, give me stuff. It's a story about authority, about deferring to authority. All of the Bible is a story about deferring to authority, either directly or implied. And the stuff that kind of makes sense to flat earthers are basically remnants of discoveries and ideas from times past. That's all they are. They don't discuss electricity. They don't discuss the pyramids. They don't discuss aqueducts. They don't discuss stuff that was there at the time. So what is this? It's a story. And it's a story about deferring to authority. Whose authority? Whoever it is that tells you that they represent God. And that's the Vatican or the Muslim imams or whoever you want to say. But this is what's going on. And what these people do is they inculcate ideas about the devil. The devil's trying to trick you, trying to suck you in, trying to hoodwink you. He's after you. He's watching you. You better pray to God for protection. That's all it is. And that's it. And by the way, amen is what was said in Egypt because the messenger to Ra was Amen Ra. Ra's son, Amen Ra. So the messages go to Ra through Amen Ra. And in the new telling, the messages go to God through Jesus Christ. Amen. As if to take the piss, they have the word Amen in there. And you can disbelieve me, get the book, the Egyptian origins of the Hebrew people. I didn't write it. I'm not saying it's all true. I'm not saying it's all false. It's Jewish people that wrote this, and they're saying basically the whole of the Jewish religion is a bunch of bullshit. And that religion is the seed for Christianity. and Christianity was written by Romans. So who were the Romans? The Romans were the authority figures. Who are the Catholics? The Catholic Roman Church. The Roman Catholic Church. RC, Roman Catholic. It's right there in the name, hidden in plain sight.
Talking of things hidden in plain sight, we had this semi-debate before the show began, which was about the information that Cami had discovered. Now, Cami has basically been routing for about 12 months through what can only be considered to be published information. It's not hidden. Now, it's not wonderful in its presentation either. It's sort of tiny thumbnails that she's found in amongst other data, and in a certain way it's been manipulated. So one of the projections, if you want to call it that, that she showed was of the orbits that the sun and moon take. The problem, if you want to call it that, that it had in its presentation was it had a what looked like a globe at the center. Now, the way Cami explained it to us was consider that the North Star and everything below these two orbital bodies to be the flat Earth map, whatever that may be. But in the way it's presented, the way it's left into the layman, to somebody who's not hunting with this in mind, they just come across what looks like a globe with, it looks odd because it's got the sun and the moon orbiting the Earth. Obviously in the heliocentric system, we're orbiting the sun and the moon is orbiting us. But to anybody who just comes across it, they just think it's a strange layout. In reality, this particular layout literally depicts how the sun and moon go above our heads. Now, it's not that she's just come across this information and takes it as takes it at face value. What she's actually done is tracked the moon's path and tracked the sun's path for a solid year, night after night after night after night. She's gone out and she's researched it. This brings us back to the doing. She's not asking anybody to tell her what the moon does. She's not going through YouTube videos looking at what the moon does. She's going out and tracking what the moon does, and then found it modeled what she's watched and observed, and it makes sense, and she can recreate it and remodel it. Now, all of this, this gives me goosebumps talking now. I don't know about you, Antonio, but when you see things like this explained to you by someone like Cami, it's amazing. You know, she has taken it upon herself to figure out how the phases of the moon worked. And by doing so, she has come across a model that she theorized 12 months ago, but she's found the pieces. She's built upon her theory. She's uncovered the pieces that aren't hidden. These aren't subliminally embedded in some bloody movie. These are just, you know, on the shelf, scientific discoveries laid out in how they are. You know, they're taking the measurements to the sun, they're taking the measurements to the moon. That's what they do. The fact that they've plonked a bloody globe in the middle of it is just kind of, you know, a way of disguising what it is for your average Joe that might stumble upon it. For someone like Cami, who has taken it upon herself to research this, she's watched it, she's really studied it. So it makes perfect sense when she sees it modeled in the two-dimensional world, because she's watched it happen in the three-dimensional world. She can make those connections. But in order to do that, she's had to completely free herself of the heliocentric entanglement that we are programmed. She is too. You know, I can't say it for anybody who watches this show right now. It might not be true in 10 years if this isn't wiped from YouTube. You know, anybody watching this show right now has had this brainwashing and would have to have fought that tooth and nail as Cami has done. And, you know, when she's on tomorrow, the first thing I'll say is, you know, well done you, you know, good on you. You know, I look up and respect people who do stuff like that. It frustrates me when there's people who will ridicule the efforts of people like that, or ask for more. You know, it's
yes.
like, wow.
This is what I was saying about people asking for data from the sun tracking. It's like, dude, you put it together. Globebusters showed everything that Cami found. They showed everything so that people can put it together themselves. So the most interesting thing about this, from my point of view, is that none of it is based on theoretical physics. What happened was, a year ago, Bob, Shannon 60, and Cammy are discussing the flat Earth and like, what the hell? How can things be going on? The sun is not out there. We're not spinning around the sun. All of these things. And Bob said to her, it has to be magnetism. Magnetism must be what's going on. Magnetism must be running things, at least certain things. Now we look at a video that's been released today that's absolutely freaking stunning about the flat Earth having no forests. Go and view it. It's really freaking cool. But anyway, so Bob says to Cammy, it must be magnetism. Magnetism must be playing a much more important role than we've been told. Cammy took this, thought about it, pondered upon it, thought about it for a year. While she's thinking about it, she's coming to realizations. Not womanly, intuitive, wishy-washy realizations, but real human realizations. She's realizing if there are magnetism, energetic forces happening, then surely other humans who are experimental physicists, the guys that build equipment to test stuff, these guys must be trying to check it, must be trying to see what's going on. So she looks for these things and she finds them. They're not hidden. They're just not well publicized, but they're not hidden. So this is what happens. She starts to think, right, this kind of thing must be going on. Let's see if it is. She goes online, boom, there you go, Stanford University, various different places with experimental physicists, not theoretical, I repeat, not theoretical. Experimental physicists have tested where magnetic lines are, how they flow, how they move, where they're more and less acute. And they've plotted this. Now, they've plotted it on an atlas-style spread of the Earth. That's what they've done. What Cammy has done is she has found this, and she knows that the atlas, the standard atlas display of the Earth is warped. She has visualized it being round, similar to the ominous, sorry, not ominous, to the opposite of popular. What's the word? Infamous A map. Vaguely like this. There are things that we'll sort out. She's plotted it on this, and she's seen that this match her intuitive observations of what must be going on, her real experiential experience of what's going on, and this validating data from experimental physicists. She's done this with the Earth. Then she's taken her knowledge of crystals and realized that there's a crystal that can levitate under a magnetic force, and that this crystal changes color depending on what gravity it interacts with. Sorry, not gravity, what radiation it interacts with. Now, you can have something levitating and affected by something being affected by magnetism and being affected by radiation, where the radiation does not disturb the magnetism. Radiation can disturb the magnetism too, but there are ranges of radiation that don't. So you have this crystal that exists right here that can float under the correct magnetic force. And this crystal lights itself up. It is self-luminous under radiation of specific types. It has a range of colors that it goes through, which happen to be yellow, white, bluish, and red. That's what we have with the moon. She's done this. She's realized this. She has seen the faces of the moon. She has realized how the moon is orbiting. She has realized how it's up there. She's realized what's keeping it up there, what's keeping it moving, what's keeping the sun moving, what's keeping them in their orbits, all of these things. So when Nathan and I did the, excuse me, When Nathan and I plotted the sun, we were already thinking the way to establish where land masses are is the sun, but it has to be timed. It has to be continuous. We can't rely on asking people where was the sun at 7 o'clock, because there's all the UTC distortions between the distances and places. Instead, if we have us 24 hours seeing where the sun is at various different points, we can establish where it's being seen from, and we can establish where things can be plotted. Because you have to remember, for this azimuthal and for any other globe or atlas type map, what's being done is time of day, location of the sun, location of the stars, and location of the borders. But time of day, that's the point. If you think your time of day is midday in China at a certain time, you're going to think you're a certain distance away, and you're going to plot the globe according to the time instead of according to the sun and the actual distance. Back when they gridded out the world with the meridians, with the latitude and longitude, back then they didn't have a way of cross-referencing the time, the sun's location. So they had no way of knowing how the readings they were getting were confirmable. Could they confirm that they were at this point at this time, being that distance? No, they couldn't. So they just filled in the blanks, which is why we have distorted maps everywhere, because they filled in the blanks. Now we should have the technology, and I think we do have, as human beings, the technology to actually map the whole of the Earth, okay, with high altitude drones, with high altitude balloons, with whatever, to map the whole Earth. But we're not going to see it just yet. I think when we draw up the map, and eventually in time, it is displayed, because it will, sooner or later, the globe will be left behind, new discoveries will happen, things. You have to have patience, number one, and two, you have to allow for the system that the controllers run, which, by the way, is the same system that guarantees that you have food in your supermarket and fuel at your pump. So this system is not altogether evil, okay? When these people have managed to change the system gradually to the point where they're talking about the globe not being quite what they thought it was, to it being more like this, and after the old people have passed away and the next generation have passed away and the teaching has been flattened out, at that point they can display a map of the real Earth. Now luckily, by that point, to the people who are here, they will have a map that was created by people like Nathan, me, Cami, and others like us, that will be very close to the map that they will actually have of the actual real land masses on the Earth.
That's a good segue into plugging Cami being on tomorrow. So we will go into great detail about not only what it potentially could be and how things can be worked on into the future, but ultimately how the maps still work and why curving the map around itself, i.e. the globe, is a very logical and sensible thing to do based on the magnetic field lines that we're presented with on our electromagnetic Earth, if you want to call it that. There was one word I'm going to mention before we close out this show, Antonio, in preparation for Cami's trip to the fourth wall tomorrow, and that was the word realization, or realize. You kept on saying that Cami realized, and the act of discovering something as a fact is what it's all about, and that's what being a flat earther is all about, realization. It's a great word. Would you not agree?
Yes. And there's also the revelation, which means the finding, the seeing, which is also the realizing that you're seeing. So the revelation that we do have so much more potential that we've been led to believe, which is a point you raised earlier. We have the potential to do incredible things. We have the potential to realize incredible things. Not realize in the conspiracy world where realize means real lies. which is basically, in case anybody didn't know, a slightly psychotic thought where you can chop things into things and they have all these extra meanings. No, to realize means to make real. That's what it means. Or to notice as real. If you realize a fantasy, then you haven't actually realized. You've conceptualized, but you haven't realized. Okay? So, realizing and revealing, revelation, the revelation that we are beings that can achieve magnificent things. And we're here for a time. We don't know how long, but after we're here for this time, we continue. We don't end. There's no nothingness. There's continuation. And I think it's better if you continue having contributed to improving things rather than
on that note, Antonio, we will definitely be continuing this revelation and realization tomorrow. So I think at this point I will thank all of the audience and the people in chat for joining myself and Antonio Subrat on Mechanics of the Fourth Wall. Make sure you all join in tomorrow in the chat again when we have Cami Nodal on the show. In the meantime, thanks again. I've been Nathan Oakley. I will see you all in the next video.